Hello and welcome to the latest episode in the Institute of Directors ASEAN Special Interest Group series, the UK and CPTPP. What does it mean for business and trade with ASEAN? In this country-specific episode, you might be able to tell from the flag behind me that we'll be focusing on Vietnam and specifically why the CPTPP is important to UK's trading relationship with Vietnam, where the opportunities sit and how to avail of them. I'm Gavin Wilkins. I'm the co-chair of the Institute of Directors ASEAN Special Interest Group. We're a community of directors, IOD members and other stakeholders who are engaged in or interested in doing business connected with the ASEAN region. If you'd like to engage with us, you can find us on the Institute of Directors website, iod.com, where we've got a special page and section dedicated to the ASEAN SIG. You can connect with us on LinkedIn, you'll find our group there, or indeed you can just connect directly with me and I'll be delighted to hear from you. So on the 15th of December 2024, the UK became part of the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP. It's an acronym that rolls off the tongue. In doing so, it became part of one of the largest free trade areas in the world, accounting for around 15% of global GDP. There's 12 member nations within the CPTPP, of which the UK is one, and 4 of those are within ASEAN: Brunei, Singapore, Vietnam, and Malaysia. And as I said, today we'll be focusing on Vietnam and what the CPTPP means for the UK's trading relationship with Vietnam. And I'm delighted to be here at the Old Admiralty building, the home of the UK government's Department of Business and Trade. I'm delighted to be joined by Olivia, who sits within the CPTPP utilisation team in the UK DBT and specifically heads up Vietnam. So I'm talking to the right person. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for having me, Gavin. It's lovely to be here. And I'm making my podcast debut today, so I'm very excited about
excellent.
that.
Maybe if you could start by telling us a little bit about yourself, what you do in the areas that you specialise in.
Yeah, of course. So as you said, I'm Olivia Herford. I here at DBT head up our CPTPP utilisation function, and I take a specific lead on Vietnam as a country. And I also have the Australia and New Zealand bilateral FTAs in my portfolio, which I picked up recently. So basically my job is trying to help UK businesses understand what it is that we've signed up to in trade agreements and how that creates commercial opportunities in market for them. So a bit of translation and a bit of trade promotion, I would say, is the sort of core part of my job.
So maybe if we start by just talk us through why the Vietnamese market is important for UK business.
Vietnam is such a fast-growing market, and in the world, but particularly in that sort of Southeast Asia region. Their growth last year was over 6%. We think that it will hit similar in 2025. They're growing. Their digital economy is growing rapidly as well. Their population, it's young, it's tech savvy. They're well educated, but the wages are not maybe as high as some of the other economies in that region, the likes of Singapore. And I think that they're ambitious as well. They've set their sights on becoming a high-income economy by 2045. They're really open to sort of innovation and trade. They love trade. They've signed lots of trade deals. So I think they're really open and ready to trade with the UK, which, that in itself is a key factor.
And are there any sectors specifically that present opportunity or the most opportunity?
Yeah, so I think I'd probably start with energy. So with a growing population, particularly one that's developing with our growing middle classes, there's a sort of big demand to increase energy provisions in Vietnam. So there's sort of infrastructure that needs updating, the grid, but they're also going through their energy transition at the same time. And that's an area that the UK has got such strong expertise in clean energy. So whether that's infrastructure parts or actually in the sort of advisory or engineering space as well, I think we've got really strong expertise that Vietnam can sort of learn from there. It'd be really hard not to talk about agri-food and drink. Massive for us. It's easy to talk about in terms of sort of trade. Of course, they love whiskey. We're very, very great at producing whiskey in the UK, but also our dairy, our seafood products, and actually very recently, the UK has now got access to Vietnam to sell live seafood, which is a great great win for us, and similar wins in the sort of poultry and pork markets have happened within the last sort of 18 months or so. So there's definite, things that the UK produces, we've sort of really recognised for quality that there's demand for in the Vietnamese market. But just to touch on sort of services as well, our relationship at the minute is heavily based on goods trade, but I think there's a gap there in services. Again, the UK services economy, we've got such strong expertise here. We already sell a lot of sort of travel and logistics services to Vietnam, but I think where we've got sort of gaps and room to grow is particularly in the financial services sector. We've got such strong institutions. The City UK here in London are actually supporting Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam to become an international financial centre. So they've got that sort of ambition there. We're hoping to support them through that journey. They're also really pro digitization in Vietnam. So look to fintech or sort of in the other sectors, agri-tech or e-commerce is massive. And I'll just sort of round up by saying education is massively important sort of culturally in Vietnam, but the way that British sort of institutions and our curriculum is really well respected in Vietnam. And I think, as I was saying about that sort of growing middle class with maybe a little bit more disposable income, that's something where they really want to spend their money, whether that's on, the British sort of curriculum in private institutions or online teaching. So I think there's a sort of room to grow there. But we've got great sector leads in country as well who are, know the market inside out, and they're all sort of great to advise on where the kind of key opportunities are in the market.
Great. So you made it sound like a feast of opportunities, a banquet.
I hope so, I think.
That's excellent. And what does the current trade agreement landscape look like between the UK and Vietnam, and how is that helping business to grow?
Vietnam actually has a lot of trade agreements. They're part of some of those big blocs in the region, as you mentioned, ASEAN members, but RCEP as well. Mm-hmm. Between the UK and Vietnam, we've got 2 trade agreements. So there's the UK-Vietnam bilateral free trade agreement, which sort of evolved from the agreement that we had with the EU and Vietnam. So that came into force for the UK in 2021, so a few years ago now. And then we've got CPTPP. What they both are real commitments to our trading relationship. If it makes trade a bit easier, a bit cheaper, but also increases sort of transparency, so then businesses have more confidence to trade, and just opening up market access. But if maybe things don't go quite as smoothly as you want them to, it also creates routes to address these issues, to address sort of market access barriers that are coming up. So I think we've had a really strong foundation with the UK-Vietnam FTA, and CPTPP really builds on that. It's not necessarily, better. It's just different and it offers more choice. So, businesses now, you don't have to pick one over the other. One doesn't replace the other. It just adds to the complement, I think, of provisions that are there to really help ease trade between our 2 countries. What's best for you might depend on your business model. So I'd say go and have a look at both. Yeah,
so it's a broad landscape. But within the CPTPP specifically, what areas of that agreement should businesses be tuned into in terms of Vietnam-UK trade?
I would say, tariffs, particularly in the current global context, it's hard not to talk about them, and they are so often the most tangible part of a trade deal. Yeah. And particularly with our trade at the minute being very goods heavy with Vietnam, absolutely they're kind of a really key part. And with the UK-Vietnam FTA, actually lots of the tariffs were already liberalised on lots of UK products, but CPTPP has added additional products to that. So we will have 99% of the sort of products that UK sells to Vietnam, exports to Vietnam, will be tariff-free. Some of them are staged over a number of years, and actually CPTPP often makes that happen a bit quicker. So those tariffs will be reduced quicker, on the likes of alcohol, sort of gin, whiskey. But then also in the good space, accumulation provisions. So one for the trade nerds out there. If you're sourcing your materials or ingredients for your products, you can get those sort of parts, components, source them from different CPTPP countries, and they will class as if they've originated in the UK. So you can then get access to preferential tariffs, really good if you're looking at diversifying your supply chains. Obviously, Vietnam being such a key manufacturing hub, that's really, really important for Vietnam, and also being close to some of the other CPTPP markets like Singapore and Malaysia. But then on the services side, I mean, and goods too, I'd say temporary entry, being able to send, either go yourselves or send your employees out to markets to visit, and being able to stay for a bit longer than maybe would have been allowed previously and under more sectors. That's it. If you're going to make a big investment in a country or you're looking for customers, so important to get out there and actually get a feel, is this the right market for you? Build those relationships with sort of clients and things out in Vietnam.
100%.
So important.
What have you been doing within your role or the wider DBT to engage with business, to get the message out there? How are businesses responding to that?
Yeah, as I say, absolutely. We've been out and about all up and down the country, and in the CPTPP markets as well over the last few months. It's been really busy, the run up to entry into force of the deal, and see since it's been in force, that can vary from me sitting on a panel in a webinar online with our partners like the IOD or others, to picking up the phone, talking to a business about their sort of specific questions about entering the Vietnamese market and how CPTPP can help them specifically. Like I say, I've been up and down the UK, going to visit businesses, doing events in person. But I mean, the real highlight for me has been getting out to market, being in Vietnam. I was out there in February for my second visit in the last 2 years, speaking at a couple of conferences there, so one on trade in goods and one on trade in services. We're doing that alongside the Vietnamese government as well, so it's a real joint effort to put these on. And just hearing the real buzz about the relationship, about making this work for UK and Vietnamese businesses. Some colleagues have just come back from Singapore, literally a couple of days ago, where they were looking at businesses that are already based in Singapore and how they can make that next step into maybe the slightly less developed markets of Vietnam and Malaysia. So there's an awful lot that we're doing in that space. I already have spoken to a number of businesses that, because of the tariff reductions, they've been able to, it's become a competitive choice for them to, send their goods out to Vietnam, from dry shampoo to sort of bigger infrastructure projects, particularly talking to quite a lot of companies that are looking at maybe moving their manufacturing hubs and thinking about Vietnam as an option for that. So I think there's an excitement about the future of Vietnam as a market.
So a buzz, collaboration, opportunity, momentum, they're all great words. But of course, in all of this, there's a lot to take in. There's a lot of information there. Where should businesses be going to find out more about what this means for them?
It's really complicated, and we often see the trade agreements as a hook into the market. It might not be the be-all and end-all. So obviously very happy to reach out to sort of us and the team. We're always on hand to either answer your questions or kind of put you in touch with the right people. And I think, as I mentioned before, we've got excellent teams that are based out in country, in Vietnam. They know that market inside out, so we can put you in touch with them there. We've got a lot of resources online as well if people want to go and do some research. So we produced a range of guidance across all of the CPTPP markets, touching on things from rules of origin and digital trade to sector-specific pieces of guidance. So you can find that on great.gov.uk on the Vietnam market page there. But I mean, there's all sorts we've got online. We have something called the Export Academy, where we do training videos. There's online tariff checkers, which are great for entering your specific sort of product codes, and you can see the tariffs available from CPTPP and the bilateral, and also what it would be if you weren't able to trade under those preferential terms for a trade agreement. But there's all sorts of things outside of government as well. Go to your local chambers, or the British Chamber of Commerce in Vietnam as well, are also great. But I say, your trade association, whether that's your sector-specific one, we work really closely with lots of trade associations and trying to use them as amplifiers, because they're so much closer to the business community themselves. And of course, partners like the IOD, we're always trying to amplify that message. But I think there's a lot out there to do your research, but also just, give us a shout, reach out.
That's excellent. Olivia, thanks very much. Thanks for having me. I think we've exhausted our allotted time with a lot of information there, but I hope it's stimulated interest, opportunities. Get in touch.